Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Authorities in the Indian state of Rajasthan say that they received quite the unusual confession from a suspect last week after he was arrested following a terrifying attack at an elementary school and claimed that he had only done it to prove that he was still alive. The disturbing incident took place sometime on July 19th when the suspect in question, Baburam Bill, walked into the Chulibera Dharana school in the city of Balotra. Armed with a knife and a bottle of gasoline, Bill proceeded to take several teachers and students hostage. By the time police arrived and were able to take Bill into custody, he had allegedly stabbed 3 of the victims, identified as the acting school headmaster, a teacher, and a parent. The 2 school staff members were hospitalized with serious injuries. While the situation was understandably very serious, the whole thing got a lot stranger when police questioned Bill and he revealed the motive behind the shocking crime. The man claimed that he had only carried out the attack because he was trying to prove to the government that he was alive. According to Bill, his problem started a little while ago when he received a death certificate in his own name at his home in Mithora village. Bill claimed that he tried to get the error corrected several times, but no matter what he did, government officials wouldn't listen. Fearing that they would confiscate his property because they considered him dead, Bill decided he needed to take drastic measures. Apparently, the attack on the school wasn't even the first thing he had tried. Bill allegedly committed several other crimes, stating that he hoped that once he was arrested, authorities would be forced to recognize and correct their error. It's unclear what these other crimes were, but it seems that they were not effective in getting the attention that he required. Of course, that has changed now, as Bill's name and face are all over the news. Unfortunately for him, he's also now looking at some serious charges. In the meantime, authorities say that they are looking into his claims about the erroneous death certificate. Officials in France say that they are conducting an extremely complex and widespread investigation this week, days after the country's high-speed train network was the target of a coordinated arson attack, one that disrupted service for hundreds of thousands of passengers just hours before the opening ceremony of the 2024 Olympic Games. The situation began in the early morning hours of July 26th, when 3 train signaling stations were simultaneously attacked by groups of unknown suspects. In each case, the culprits broke into an area where fiber optic cables were housed that were vital to the functioning of France's high-speed rail network. These cables reportedly pass information for traffic controllers and supervisors so that they know what's happening on the rail lines. After soldering open metal protective cases, flammable liquid was poured on the cables and set on fire. According to representatives from the SNCF, France's national state-owned railway company, the attacks were quite sophisticated and showed obvious signs of extensive planning and knowledge of the high-speed rail system. They say that the signaling stations affected were not randomly chosen, but instead were specifically targeted to cause maximum disruption. All of the stations that were hit were at points close to where tracks split in 2 directions, and the 3 sites were located north, east, and west of the capital. A 4th attack is believed to have been attempted as well, though was reportedly foiled by maintenance workers. The resulting damage from the attacks caused disruption to at least 250,000 train passengers on the day of the attack, and is estimated to have affected hundreds of thousands more over the following couple of days. Of course, this was a huge deal considering the amount of people that were expected to travel to Paris that day for the opening ceremony of the 2024 Olympics. Still, by working around the clock, rail workers were able to mitigate the worst of the fallout. By July 29th, it was reported that pretty much all train service had been restored. As for who exactly is responsible for the attacks, that remains an open question at this time. However, authorities say that they are pursuing several theories. Officials say that they had already been on high alert for foreign interference in the Olympic Games, particularly by Russian actors. That being said, the most widely circulated theory at the moment is that far-left anarchist groups may have been responsible. Speaking after Friday's events, France's interior minister told reporters that authorities had identified a, quote, number of profiles of people who could have committed these very deliberate, very targeted acts of sabotage. He went on to say that the attacks were, quote, the traditional mode of operation of the ultra-left. Also on July 29th, officials announced that they had arrested a left-wing activist who was found behaving suspiciously near a railway site. So far, this man's name has not been released, and he has not been officially linked to Friday's incident. However, authorities say that he was found in possession of access keys to SNCF technical premises, tools, and literature linked to far-left movements. At the time of this recording, he is still being questioned. While no person or group has officially taken responsibility for the attacks, it's believed that potential charges against the perpetrators, if and when they are found, could include criminal conspiracy, damage to property likely to affect the fundamental interests of the nation, and damage and attempted damage by dangerous means in an organized gang. The charges reportedly carry sentences of up to 20 years in prison and hundreds of thousands of euros worth of fines. Authorities in Western Australia say that a 29-year-old man is lucky to be alive this week, following a terrifying and unhinged attack at the hands of a work colleague. The whole thing started sometime after 11 a.m. on July 29th, when the victim, 29-year-old Trey Black, was working at a construction site in the Perth suburb of City Beach. He was in the middle of his job at an address on Catesby Street when he was approached by a co-worker from another site, 25-year-old Matthew William Lawson. Moments later, the two men got into a heated argument. While the nature of that argument is unclear, we know from witness reports that Lawson began shouting at Black that he was going to get him. Things escalated when Lawson reportedly took a jackhammer to the windshield of a nearby car, causing Black to take off running in an attempt to get away. Black ran several hundred yards from the job site over onto the nearby West Coast Highway, though he was unable to escape. That's because Lawson apparently followed him in a Mazda pickup truck, hitting him as he ran down the roadway. The resulting collision reportedly severed Black's right leg from below the knee. Witnesses say that Lawson continued the savage attack with a hammer, hitting Black several times before finally running away. The whole scene played out in front of terrified motorists on the highway and quickly brought traffic to a standstill. Multiple people who had seen what was going on immediately rushed to the injured man's aid. One of these Good Samaritans, who just so happened to be an off-duty orthopedic doctor, used a strap from her purse to create a makeshift tourniquet for Black's leg, while another person found the severed limb and handed it over to emergency responders. Authorities say that the actions of the doctor and other Good Samaritans likely saved Black's life. He was taken to a hospital and is in critical but stable condition. As for Lawson, he was arrested by police roughly 15 minutes later, still close to the crime scene. In a court appearance the following day, the 25-year-old was urged to seek legal counsel, but instead immediately pleaded guilty to an attempted unlawful killing charge. Lawson is expected to appear in court again on August 21st. Officials in Zambia say that they have arrested 5 people this week and are searching for at least one other suspect, following the brutal kidnapping and murder of the country's highest-ranking telecommunications regulator. According to reports, the situation began sometime on the evening of July 23rd, when the victim, Guntila Mulea, left his office at the Independent Broadcasting Authority in the nation's capital of Lusaka. Mulea was supposed to be heading straight home. However, police were called by worried family members several hours later when he failed to arrive. A search for Mulea ended tragically when the following morning his lifeless body was found by a man on his way to work. Mulea had been shot once in the back and once in the head, his remains dumped at the side of a gravel road on the outskirts of the city. 2 bullet casings were also found at the scene. Very quickly, many people began to speculate that Mulea's murder had something to do with his new job as the Director General of the Independent Broadcasting Authority. The important businessman had only been appointed to the role back in May, but immediately had gained publicity for his efforts to investigate and root out corruption within the organization. It seems that these suspicions were correct, as just days after the discovery of the killing, officials came out saying that several arrests had been made. Among those arrested were 2 police officers, 1 reservist officer, a civilian, and an accountant at the IBA. Authorities now allege that this last suspect, along with a second accountant at the IBA, were part of a group of colleagues who were fearful of Mulea's anti-corruption efforts. As a result, they reportedly hired the civilian to abduct the Director General and break his legs, believing that he would then be forced to take a long sick leave. It's further alleged that the plan went off the rails when the civilian suspect subcontracted the job to the 3 police officers. When they went to carry out the crime, one of them was recognized by Mulea. Realizing that he could identify him, the officers reportedly shot and killed him instead. According to local media reports, at the time the 5 suspects were arrested, they were in possession of vehicles belonging to Mulea, as well as several weapons. Additionally, they had a bunch of cash, which they were reportedly paid by the 2 corrupt accountants. The second accountant, accused of masterminding the plot, apparently fled to Australia before he could be arrested and is currently at large. At the time of this recording, the investigation continues. Representatives from Uruguay's national police say that they are investigating a tragic and mysterious case this week after an officer was killed during what was supposed to be a training exercise. According to reports, the incident took place on the night of July 25th, during the middle of a 2-day training seminar that was being held by the country's national police union, known as Sepolna. The organizers and participants of that seminar were preparing to wrap up for the evening. However, there was still one more drill to run. It involved a scenario where an officer would pretend to respond to a robbery at a debt-collecting business. The scenario began around 10 p.m. with 37-year-old police officer Virginia Hernandez being in the training role. The robber, meanwhile, was played by the General Secretary of the Union, 48-year-old Fabricio Rios. The whole thing was apparently supposed to go like this. Fabricio would enter the business, fire a shot, and begin to act out a robbery. Hernandez, meanwhile, would wrestle the weapon away from the armed attacker. However, as you probably already guessed, that's not how things went. Instead, during the struggle, Hernandez reportedly pulled out her own service weapon and shot Fabricio in the chest with a real bullet. The 48-year-old was rushed to a local hospital, but not long afterwards was pronounced dead from his injuries. While the immediate reaction from most people involved was that the situation was a tragic accident, investigators have since said that the situation might not be so clear-cut. One of the reasons why is that apparently the police union was never cleared to use actual firearms in their live training exercises. On top of this, there was the question of how Hernandez's weapon came to be loaded in the first place. An official from the union has already come out and said that the weapons were checked, including for chambered rounds, before the exercise began. However, there are also local media reports that state that Hernandez was in a rush to get the drill over with and had actually asked to leave early. One of the theories is that when she agreed to stay and finish the seminar, she forgot to go through the process again of properly unloading her service weapon. At the time of this recording, officials are treating the situation as a negligent homicide, and Hernandez has been arrested. However, it's unclear if the case will go further, as it's still quite fuzzy as to where the blame for the shooting actually lies. There are even those who have suggested that the shooting might have been intentional, though so far it does not seem that any actual evidence of this has been provided. Currently, the situation is still under investigation. Over the course of this series, we've covered some truly stupid motives for murder. However, this next story might just be the dumbest one we've come across yet. Authorities on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi say that a man is facing murder charges this week after he was accused of brutally stabbing his friend to death during an argument that allegedly started over a grade school riddle. The whole thing took place sometime on July 24th, when the victim, 47-year-old Kadir Marcus, traveled to the suspect's home in Tongkuno district. He had apparently traveled there to repay a debt. However, after handing over the money, the men decided to have a few drinks. That's when the suspect, identified only by the initials DR, began posing a series of riddles. While it's unclear what most of these riddles were, we definitely know what one of them was, because it allegedly launched a fatal argument. It began when DR asked Marcus one that we're probably all familiar with. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Apparently, the men disagreed on the answer to the paradoxical question, prompting tensions to flare. With the added alcohol in the mix, things quickly spiraled out of control. Though it appears that Marcus attempted to leave his friend's house, DR was allegedly so incensed by the argument that he chased him down. Once he caught his friend, DR reportedly stabbed him repeatedly with a type of dagger known as a badik until Marcus was dead. Police quickly arrested DR and were able to retrieve the weapon. DR has now been charged with murder and is looking at up to 18 years in prison if convicted. Authorities in Japan's Shizuoka prefecture say that a nationwide manhunt has been launched for a 27-year-old man this week, after he was accused of killing 3 of his own family members in a disturbing act of domestic violence. The case began at around 2:30 p.m. on July 28th, when police in the city of Kikugawa received a frantic phone call from a woman. The woman said that her 52-year-old sister, Rumiko, had just contacted her saying that there was a man behaving violently inside their house. When police arrived at the scene, they found Rumiko, as well as her 2 elderly parents, 87-year-old Shoichi and 81-year-old Ikuko Shibuya. All 3 were suffering from serious stab wounds. Ikuko was still coherent enough to give officers some information about what had happened. Based on details that she and the original female caller provided, they were able to identify the alleged attacker as the caller's son, 27-year-old Koichi Katayama. The 3 victims were rushed to a local hospital, though sadly, all of them would later succumb to their injuries. While the exact circumstances of the awful crime still largely remain a mystery, based on the information police have released about the witness statements so far, it appears that Katayama first attacked his grandmother, kicking her in the abdomen before carrying out the stabbings. The 3 victims and Katayama's mother reportedly lived at the house, though Katayama himself did not. At the time of this recording, a nationwide manhunt has been launched for the 27-year-old. In police reports, Katayama has been described as approximately 165 centimeters tall, being of medium build, and having a shaved head. The search continues. After finishing the initial recording for this segment, news was released that Koichi Katayama had been arrested. According to Japanese authorities, the 27-year-old was successfully located and taken into custody sometime on the night of July 30th. He was found at a lodging facility in Tottori City, nearly a 300-mile drive from the initial crime scene. Katayama was suffering from a knife wound to the chest at the time he was arrested, though police say that his injuries are not life-threatening. They also claim that he has since admitted to killing his 3 family members. The situation is still developing. People across the UK have been left shocked and heartbroken this week, following a vicious knife attack at what was supposed to be a fun-themed kids' dance class. A crime that has so far left 3 children dead and nearly a dozen other people injured. The awful situation unfolded shortly before noon on July 29th at a small studio space in the English town of Southport. At the time, a summer holiday class was being put on for local children between the ages of 6 and 11. The kids were near the end of a morning of making crafts, doing yoga, and enjoying dance lessons themed to Taylor Swift songs, when suddenly, the whole thing abruptly turned into a real-life nightmare. While the exact details of what took place are still unclear even a few days later, what we do know is that a young man armed with a knife entered the building. He then proceeded to attack the children who were there, as well as any other people who got in his way. The chilling situation lasted for several minutes as horrified witnesses attempted to get the young victims to safety and alert police. Some chose to heroically intervene directly, putting themselves in harm's way in order to bring the carnage to an end. One of these Good Samaritans, a personal trainer named Joel Verity, is now being credited with helping the first police who arrived at the scene to tackle the suspect to the ground so that he could be taken into custody. Joel was far from the only hero, though. According to reports, a 63-year-old businessman, Jonathan Hayes, ran into the studio after hearing the screams of those inside and was stabbed in the leg by the attacker while trying to help. A pair of women who were said to be the event organizers also risked their lives trying to get the 25 children in their care to safety. Both are now reportedly in critical condition due to injuries they sustained during the attack. The women are believed to have helped at least 16 of the children escape. So far, only one of the women has been identified, as 35-year-old Leanne Lucas. Sadly, the women weren't the only casualties of the awful crime. It's now been reported that 3 children died of their injuries, and at least 8 others were injured. Of those, 5 remain in critical condition at the time of this recording. The 3 deceased children have since been identified as 6-year-old BB King, 7-year-old Elsie Stancombe, and 9-year-old Elise Aguiar. Unfortunately, it appears that the knife attack itself wasn't the end of the tragedy. In the aftermath of the incident, officials say that a vigil that was planned for the victims was hijacked and turned into a violent riot, the genesis of which appears to be outrage fueled by online misinformation concerning the identity of the perpetrator. So far, all police have confirmed about the suspect is that he is a 17-year-old boy from Banks, a village located several miles outside of Southport. Authorities say that the teen cannot be identified due to his age, though they also revealed that he was born in Cardiff, in Wales. Despite this, in the hours after the fatal stabbing attack, rumors began to circulate online that the perpetrator was a Muslim immigrant who had only arrived in the UK sometime last year. This information is believed to have come from a website calling itself Channel 3 Now News. The site purports to be from the United States, but has no named journalists, and according to reports, started out 12 years ago sharing Russian-language videos of men in cars before randomly pivoting to US news. While authorities were quick to come out and say that the details released by this website were not accurate and that they had put out the name of someone who was not the actual suspect, by the time this announcement was made, the damage was already done. The information had been widely circulated by people with large followings on social media, resulting in millions of collective views. The following day, a vigil was held for the victims of the stabbing. However, things erupted into tragedy once again after people who believed the false reports on social media showed up to protest. Many of these people, who are believed to be supporters of fringe far-right political groups, gathered outside of a local mosque in Southport, where they reportedly began to chant slogans against Islam. When police showed up to try and maintain order, things spiraled out of control and became a riot. Stones, bottles, and other items were hurled at police, officers were attacked, and police vehicles were damaged and set on fire. In the end, several officers were injured, including multiple police dogs. At the time of this recording, authorities say that they now have the added task of investigating those who participated in and were responsible for the riots, in addition to piecing together the actual circumstances of the tragic knife attack. So far, police say that they are not treating the crime as a terror attack, though no actual motive has been provided behind the situation either, and many questions remain unanswered. The situation is still developing. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.